I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, December 18th. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in City Hall in Council Chambers. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Atkinson? Here. Mr. Balfont?
Here.
Ms. Bondo?
Présente.
Ms. Figdor?
Here.
Ms. Davis?
Here.
Ms. Morioni?
Here.
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow?
Here.
Mr. Inabanza?
Here.
Mr. Norris?
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski?
Here.
Mr. Samuntu? And Mr. Abdirahman? And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the report of the chair, for my remarks tonight, as we approach the end of 2018, I want to take a minute to reflect on a year of immense growth by thanking my colleagues and on the board and staff across the district for all your work. I hope the coming December school break is an opportunity to rest and spend time with your loved ones. I also would like to remind us to take a moment to consider how fortunate many of us are during these times when our families are near, food is plentiful, and joy is in the air. That there are folks within our community that don't have such privileges. We still have children who suffer from food insecurities in our schools. Homelessness remains a reality for many, and the challenges to access quality health care and the necessary social services in order to meet daily needs makes life for some members in our society a struggle to survive, and not an opportunity to thrive. We must not forget those less fortunate than us in the good and the bad times, for we own both the successes and the failures of our children if we truly mean to prepare and empower them for life when they attend Portland Public Schools. In a few moments, as part of the superintendent's report, we'll get to hear from our community partners at Portland Empowered. I want to thank them for their support to drive the attendance at last week's high school choice event at King Middle School. With their help, the event was very well attended and allowed families an opportunity to hear from our high school principals about the different options students have for high school in Portland. Thank you also to our multilingual and multicultural center interpreters who facilitated the conversation in 7 different languages represented by families that evening. Last week, I was able to attend 2 city events that helped me gain valuable insight into the issues that our communities hold as priorities. Last Monday, at the City District 4 annual meeting, I was joined by board members Balfons and Mr. Atkinsons, and I thank you both for your time that evening. The Presumpscot Elementary School community was well represented and spoke with the council with a sense of urgency about the values of their school community. I was impressed by the passionate comments and the strong advocacy demonstrated by constituents that evening. Also, this last Saturday, at a citywide meeting with the immigrant community, I was joined by board member Bondo, and I thank her for joining us that time. The main issue raised for the school department that evening were in the form of questions around our plans for pre-K expansion across the district. As I told my colleagues in my weekly email note, I am grateful to live in a city where opportunities like these are created for residents to have direct access to their representatives. I would like to thank the City Council and City staff for holding these events and responding to people's concerns. That's all I have for today. And now for a report of the students, we have Ms. Anna Powers-Okowski from PATH.
Thank you. So there's a lot on this list. So PATHs kicked off our year in October with 470 students, which is awesome. And in August, we got a new approval for the new program in cybersecurity, so that'll be starting up soon. Construction cluster students observed safety procedures to assist towards their OSHA 10 certification with with all that construction going on around PATHs and Casco. They've just sort of seen, yeah, exactly. Let's see, Harvest Fest, again in October, had multiple program participation, and the highlight was by far the food provided by our own culinary program. And the food for the culinary program was provided by the landscaping program. And the food service program has changed their name to the Grab and Go Cafe, and had their annual Harvest Fest meal to serve over 500 people and raised money to collected canned food, for the Wayside Soup Kitchen. Culinary was in the press twice for showing recipes to Total Maine and 207, and we also hosted tours and board meetings to United Way of Greater Portland and Portland Chamber of Commerce. We had the PATHS music performance on October 25th and 26th, and both of those went phenomenally. The masonry students worked on the pathway for the metro stop, which is also called the Pocket Park. We had an advisory dinner committee of each of the programs in the school to talk about, what's needed in each class. And Skills USA, which is an organization that promotes CTE, and every year they let certain programs compete in a championship. We won over $5,000 on a Patriots raffle to raise money for it. So that's very impressive. Let's see. Also, the commercial arts students made posters for Rwanda Bean Coffee, and they had them hung all over Deering Center. And a couple of instructors went to College and Career Aspirations Day at Memorial Middle School. And we will also, actually this week itself, we were hosting visits from several middle schools, and there will be more come spring. And visits for fall 2019 enrollment will start in January. And last year we had 650 visits and expect that to increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Now for the report of the superintendent, Mr. Botana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin tonight extending our heartfelt condolences to longtime Portland High School PE and health teacher Bill Leroy on the passing of his beloved wife, Lee, this past week. Mr. Leroy, you and yours are in our thoughts and prayers. Portland Public Schools is incredibly fortunate to have an amazing group of teachers working across the district on behalf of our students and community. Tonight, we would like to recognize 3 outstanding teachers who have renewed their certification as National Board Certified Teachers: Drew Pisani, Catherine Topin, and Ann Young. You guys can rise. Drew is an English teacher at Deering High School who has been with our district since 1996. Catherine also teaches English at Deering High School and has been with the Portland Public Schools since 1998. And Anne, who could not be with us tonight, is a math teacher at King Middle School, and she has been with us since 2002. They are among 14 National Board Certified teachers who are currently members of the district staff. Elevating one's practice as a teacher is the single most important thing that we can do to improve student outcomes. One of the most rigorous and relevant ways to improve teaching practices and with its student outcomes is through teachers attaining their National Board teacher certification in the content area of their expertise. NBTC is considered the gold standard in teacher certification. By initially attaining their certification 10 years ago, Anne, Catherine, and Drew proved that they teach to the highest standards of the profession. Now, they've put in the work to renew their certification, which shows their commitment to their practice, staying at the top of their game, and ultimately staying in the place of supporting their students and elevating their profession. So congratulations, Catherine, Drew, and Anne, even though she's not with us. We thank you because our students are the beneficiaries of your incredibly hard work. Thank you. So I messed up. We were supposed to do these in running order so that we wouldn't have to do this, like getting up and down and all of that again. We'd also like to recognize somebody else. Casco Bay teacher, high school ELL teacher, Mallory Haar. Mallory attained her National Board Teacher Certification last year, and this year she has won 3 awards for outstanding teaching. You have heard me talk about each of those awards as they occurred, and finally today, we think she's done, for now, and we thought we would recognize her in person. Mallory, who's been with the Portland Public Schools since 2011, won a 2018 Lawrence W. O'Toole Teacher Leadership Award from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, which includes a $15,000 grant. She also is the 2018 recipient of the Education for the Common Good Award from Bowdoin College, and in addition, she has been awarded a Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms grant. The O'Toole Teacher Leadership Awards recognize New England public high school teachers who are advancing student-centered approaches to learning. Mallory is one of just 13 regional educators to receive the award this year, and one of only 2 in the state of Maine. Nellie Mae selected Mallory because, quote, she seeks to overcome education inequities caused by language barriers, end quote. Mallory plans to use the O'Toole grant to support the district's equity goal. She hopes to bolster professional learning among teacher leaders in our middle schools and high schools about the causes of educational inequity and teaching strategies to disrupt the structures that perpetuate those inequities in our schools. Bowdoin's Common Good Award goes to educators who represent the 3 core values of the college's education department, which are be aware of the big picture, embrace theory and practice, and live and model a spirit of inquiry. Mallory will be one of approximately 76 U.S. educators who will travel abroad through the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program this summer. She's not yet sure where she'll be traveling, or are you sure? No? Okay. But once she gets there, she hopes to learn about different educational models to promote global competency. Wherever you go, Mallory, I'm confident that you will be an incredible ambassador for the profession and will represent everything that is great about the people who work for the Portland Public Schools. Congratulations. Chair Rodriguez referenced this earlier, but recently the Maine School Management Association recognized Portland Empowered as their Community Partner of the Year. Portland Public Schools nominated Portland Empowered for their contributions to our work as a district over the past 5 years. Among their accomplishments, the passage of the board's parent engagement policy stands out, but Portland Empowered has done so much more to amplify the voice and help us to focus on our diverse parent communities. Today, members of Portland Empowered, I believe Councilor Ali is here, and he is here but not in his capacity as either counselor or former Board of Education member, but as lead organizer with Portland Empowered to talk about some of their work. So.
Religion, culture, tradition, it shapes me. And my parents were really worried about me hanging out with the wrong people because I didn't have friends at the time. It started when I was recruited by Pius Ali. I was going in freshman year, like headstrong, and I was trying to like headbutt everyone. He saw that I had strong opinions and he was interested in recruiting me to be part of the YEPs, Youth Engagement Partners. It was like a door that got open for me.
I came to a first meeting. I saw that the environment was really, welcoming, and so I really wanted to be a part of it. I was an extremely shy kid. I didn't really like to say anything. I didn't like to talk. I kept my feelings to myself.
I had this fear in me that my opinion is not going to be valued.
I didn't participate in the first few meetings. I wouldn't say shy, I was just hesitant.
During those times, like early teens, early high school, you need people to listen to you. You need people to understand you. And you need people to see you.
These high school students, it's like a safe space for them, making sure that their voice is heard within these meetings as well as their schools.
With the support of everybody around me, like, hey, Ladi, speak up a little bit. What do you think about this? I started giving out my opinions, my ideas.
I felt that I could share what I wanted to say, and I could feel that what I had to say is valuable.
I was used to like seeing all the wrong in schools and what they're not doing so good and like pointing it out. And I was okay not doing anything about it. That's why I was like really mean the first year of high school and like really dissatisfied. But when I started this group, the way I thought changed. Instead of just like criticizing and being like, oh, the school is really bad, I started thinking, oh, how can I change this? What can I do to help my school be better?
Yups made me a leader.
The Poor and Empowered is like a bridge to make sure there is a connection between school and the community. The parents were not attending the meeting, any conference, because they say the message we get from school, you see the robocall, they don't understand English. There was a barrier of language.
My job is just to get to know these parents, to get to know their goals for themselves as a family, for their children.
And after that, we organize what we call Share Space Cafe. Share Space Cafe, we bring everybody on the table.
There's nobody dominating, there's not a panel up in the front or PowerPoint or any of that. It's just all about face-to-face conversation.
Just get to know one another and get to know the school better and try and answer some questions and exchange some information. And it was a great chance for our staff to learn more about our families and hopefully for the families to learn more about our school.
This is like being a member of the community and being like family. Work together and discuss problems.
And there's a translator, but the translator is there to speak in that group's dominant language and really there to translate for those that are English speakers.
So this was a new way of involving parents and bringing them to the table.
For the first time, I was able to sit with groups of parents, small and large, and be able to really have some important dialogue, and for them to see that the school was committed to having that dialogue and was listening to their voice, I think was extremely powerful.
When we see how people respond, we start to see what we can change exactly to make sure everyone is involved, is engaged in the process. We work on the manifesto. We write a manifesto, there is key elements. And everyone in the district, the community, they agree. We celebrate the manifesto.
It was, a really exciting event when that was rolled out, and it was great to have articulated kind of parents' rights and to be able to share that with our staff so that they could begin to see the school experience through a parent's perspective and through a culturally, linguistically diverse parent's perspective, which I think we were lacking.
Being involved in a policy making is the highest level of parental involvement, and Paula Empowered was able to do this.
In many instances throughout the rest of the school year, that bridge that was established in those evenings together has really helped me be able to help families and families to be able to feel safe and that their kids are safe at the school.
No matter what, the system of school, different countries is different. But education is all the same. All the parents want the better for the kids. Our goals is to see if we improve our education and we get more kids going to college, more kids finish the college, more kids get a job.
This is not a 4 years project, it's a long term because it's about the change, and the change is not happening the next day. It takes a day, years, a decade, really a generation where people can say, okay, this is really our base, this is really our foundation, and that's why I want to see Portland Empowered. Not only be for Maine, but be really a sample example for the national-wide education base.
Thank you very much. Chair Rodriguez, school board members, Superintendent Botana. My name is Siona Ngwizani. I have kids at Ocean Avenue Elementary School. I am a parent ambassador and a lead parent organizer with Portland Empower. We are here today to thank you for the work you do on behalf of all our children, and for working with us in making sure that parent and student voices are included in the decision-making process. As a result of our work together, this year the Maine School Board Association Award has, with the Distinguished Service Award, and we are here to say thank you for nominating us and for your continued collaboration to make school better every day. Thank you very much, the bottom of our heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much for thanking us for that. We obviously think the world of this partnership. It's been transformational for this district. It precedes my tenure here. The manifesto was something that I read about as I was preparing to interview and was incredibly impressed about the work that the district was doing. And so to have been a part of that for these past 2.5 years is one of the highlights of my time here. And I think you're incredibly deserving of the award, and it is great to see the state of Maine recognize the work that is happening in Portland and that is happening in partnership between the district and Portland Empowered. So again, thank you so much for being here. The next meeting of the Enrollment and Facilities Study Commission is scheduled for tomorrow, Wednesday, December 19th at 6 p.m. in the Casco Bay High School Great Space. This session, which will deal with secondary capacity analysis, is the third session in the series of meetings for the commission. The next session after that is scheduled for January 14th, and that will provide enrollment and demographic projections, as well as introduce some conceptual proposals for efficiencies. And again, as I said, that's scheduled for January 14th. At our last meeting, I spoke about the new Mainers Resource Center at Portland Adult Ed and their launch of a program to support the diversification of our Portland Public Schools workforce through their Education Academy. I also spoke about how our Portland Adult Ed team has been working tirelessly to help to relieve the workforce challenges facing Greater Portland. I'm pleased to announce that working with the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, we're engaged in a planning similar to the Academy, but this one focused on the financial services sector. We'll have more information as that program evolves, but it's another example of how Director Anita St. Ange and her team are actively playing a leading role in addressing labor shortages in our region while making it possible for our new Mainer community to achieve its full potential. Following today's board meeting, we will have a workshop on the first read item on today's agenda dealing with the specifications for the Lyseth Elementary School building renovation. And because of the importance, the significance of this workshop, it will be broadcast and recorded. Finally, I would like to wish all of you, the extended Portland Public Schools family of students, staff, parents, and partners, as well as our viewers, a wonderful winter break. Friday is our last day of school for 2018, and we will be back in session on January 2nd, weather permitting. 2018, seniors, you're not getting 5 days, forget that. 2018 has been a very good year for Portland Public Schools, and I look forward to the new year and all of the challenges and opportunities that it will offer. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Superintendent almost called a whole snow week out. The emails on that one, huh? Okay, so report of the secretary, consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of December 3rd. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Are you keeping track?
I am, yep.
Are there any questions on the motion? Ms. Figdor?
These are the December 3rd minutes.
December 3rd, correct.
I had one change, which is the spelling of my daughter's name. It's Isabella, not Isabel, under 1D.
Isabella.
Isabella, thank you.
No, got it.
Any public, excuse me, any other questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? None. Is there, that won't be an amendment, right? It's just a friendly amendment.
It's a friendly amendment.
Good. So all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of December 3rd, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you. So consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of December 4th, 2018. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Any questions on the motion? Ms. Figdor?
I had one correction under 3A. It says that we discussed the appointment for the co-chair of the District Advisory Committee. Chair Rodriguez will vacate his position as co-chair, and Ms. Figdor is on the agenda this evening tonight to be voted on as replacement. Ms. Thompson was, I think, what would be most appropriate. So the latter half of the sentence is incorrect. So I would propose that we change the latter half of the sentence to, and Ms. Thompson will be the new co-chair. And later on in the meeting, we consider the nomination to replace my community position on the chair, but I think that's fine as a separate agenda item later in the minutes.
So is it okay if we just add that Ms. Thompson will be appointed as the co-chair?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay.
And then just leave what it currently says about Ms. Figdor is on the agenda this evening to be voted on as instead of a replacement, as a school board replacement.
Perfect.
So should we vote on that as an amendment and then go back, or just accept the minutes as an amendment? Okay. So then we'll, are there any other questions on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? None. So all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of December 4th, 2018, after the friendly amendment proposed by Ms. Figdor, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you all. All right, so report of the committees. This will be the first time that I get to go through this. Awesome. For Curriculum Committee, Mr. Balfans, please.
Yes, the Curriculum Committee will be having its first meeting at the district office on Cumberland Avenue in the United Nations room on Friday, December 21st from noon to 1 p.m. We'll be discussing the dates that we'll be meeting throughout the year, as well as topics that we'll be covering.
Operations Committee, Ms. Thompson.
We do not have a meeting scheduled at this time. Mr. Superintendent Botana and I are meeting to look at the year ahead of us. Typically, we don't meet during budget season. Very, very busy time, but we will be talking about what's ahead of us and what needs to be done sooner than later. And I guess connected to the Operations Committee as well, maybe I'll do it under other member concerns with the District Advisory and LASEF, if you'd like me to do that under other member.
So why don't you report on it now, since it is kind of...
So we're going to have a workshop this evening in regards to the DABC meeting we had on December 13th. Oh, I thought I said something wrong here.
People may not know what the
Okay. District Advisory Building Committee. I know we have a lot of acronyms these days. Thank you, Ms. Davis. And we reviewed the latest plans for the Lyseth Elementary School project. And that, again, will be on a workshop this evening. And the Lyseth Building Level Advisory Committee met prior to that to see the same information and get the feedback from the Lyseth community, and that was incorporated into the discussion that we had the other night at the District Advisory Building Committee. There's another meeting planned for the Lyseth Building Advisory Committee in January, and to be determined is the next district one, but we will certainly let everybody know. And then, oh boy, I can't remember the name of that one. Next one, Thursday night or tomorrow night.
Facility study.
Tomorrow night we have the Sustainability
Enrollment and Facilities.
Enrollment and Facilities
Study.
Commission. Study Commission. Whoa, we got a lot of committees going on. We're meeting tomorrow night to look at middle school information and review. I'm sorry?
And high school.
Oh, and high school, okay. And high school, excuse me, as well as revisit any questions that people had at the last meeting. That'll take place at Casco Bay High School at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Finance and Personnel, Ms. Trevorrow.
Thank you, Chair. The Finance and Personnel Committee met at 6 o'clock this evening, just prior to this board meeting. On the agenda, we discussed the committee's schedule for the year. We're going to be meeting regularly on the second Thursday of each month. And in the months January, February, and March, we're meeting a second time as well that we've already put in for placeholders as the fourth Thursday of the month. And we also discussed agenda setting. Since this is the Personnel Committee, we also have that under our belt. And we talked substantially about the Superintendent Evaluation. That's a tool that the committee has off and on over the years talked about revising to make it a little more Portland specific. And we're going to keep that on our agenda for now, recognizing that it may not be something that we ultimately have the capacity to address, but we'd like to if we can get to it. So we'll have that as a topic at our next agenda, at our next meeting as well. And we ended the meeting with a discussion about the legislative delegation meeting that just happened last week. This is a meeting that the school board and the city and the legislative delegation all have together on a regular basis to track what bills are going through Augusta during the legislative session that affect the city and the schools. Those are going to continue to be regular meetings with the school as a topic of the agenda at each one. There's a lot of ideas being floated around revenue at the state level that would affect education. So we're going to be tracking those. There's a few ideas in particular that seem like they may have some traction this legislative session. Bills are due in the legislature at the end of this month, so pretty soon we'll be able to see what substantial work we're going to be following throughout the year. At our next meeting, which is on January 10th, we're going to be taking an updated look at the sort of preliminary budget picture. This was reviewed by the prior Finance Committee just before the committee changed over, but there's some updates, and our new Finance Committee hasn't seen it yet, so we'll be doing that in addition to looking at the Superintendent Evaluation. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Excellent. The Policy and Legislative Affairs, Ms. Davis.
We have not met yet, but I will be meeting with the superintendent to talk about schedule and agenda actually tomorrow. And I anticipate that we'll probably start meeting in January and meet regularly. And as Mr. Varro mentioned, I attended the city's legislative committee. We'll be continuing, because this is policy and legislative affairs, we'll continue to be following the legislative initiatives that the city and our delegation are putting before the legislatures, as well as encouraging them to support legislation that other representatives or senators may place in the legislature as well that would benefit us. So that's our plan going forward, and we'll be setting a schedule for the entire year soon.
Thank you. And Public Affairs, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you. We have not met yet as a committee, but we have a meeting scheduled for January 15th at 6 p.m. at the district office. And similar to other committees, we're going to be discussing our meeting schedule for the year and agendas upcoming.
Thank you. And Appointments Committee, I'm not sure, Ms. Morioni, did you have something to report with us?
The Appointments Committee has not met, and will be acting on something tonight regarding appointments, so stay tuned. Thanks.
Thank you all. For consent items, the superintendent, please speak.
Yes, Mr. Chair, under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. As required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board memo accompanying this item, and has been the practice each donor will receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. The contributors for this meeting are Paths received the following donations: a 2002 Volkswagen Passat to be used in the automotive program from John Tabb of Portland, a 2003 Ford Escape from Terry Sawyer of Parsonfield, 2003 Honda Civic to the automotive program from David Spilsbury of Portland. Reiki Elementary School received the following donations: snacks for students from Lynn White of Portland, a basket filled with goodies and gift certificates for teachers from the Hilton Garden Inn of Portland, lunch bags and water bottles for students from Julie Spheres of Horizon Solutions, LLC, out of Scarborough. Lyman Moore Middle School received supplies for their family code night computer literacy class from Tyler Technologies of Yarmouth. Riverton Elementary School received sleds for use at recess from Robin McKeeman, care of Kara McBurney of Portland. Riverton Elementary received another donation of sleds for use at recess from Lily and Sophia Reba of Portland. And Ocean Avenue Elementary School received 3 packages of LL Bean socks, 4 pairs of Land's End boots, 4 pairs of Land's End snow pants, 6 pairs of Champion gloves, 4 hats, and 1 LL Bean child jacket for the clothing closet from Jody Halliday and Bill Kowalczyk of Peaks Island. I think they also received a partridge in a pear tree. That's it. We're very grateful to all of these contributors for their support of our work.
Thank you, Superintendent. We don't have an item for board focus on educational issues, so moving to old business, consideration and action to increase substitute teacher compensation rates. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, seconded by Ms. Victor. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Mainly, I'm going to pass this over to Ms. Stoddard, to our Executive Director of Human Resources, to discuss the specifics.
Great. Hi, everyone. So we are back to talk about the substitute teacher pay rates. We discussed this in a workshop a week ago. What I'm going to do is I put on the slides a few of the pieces of data that we talked about last week. I'm going to run through it again fairly quickly because we did spend more than an hour talking about it. Happy to take some questions. So, if you recall, we talked a little bit about the historical perspective, how long it's been since we've had a change in the rates, and how historically we've been either aligned or a market leader. We are starting to lose ground on that, which is why we're here today. So what we did is we took a look at 9 surrounding districts to gather some data this fall. If you look at the matrix, you will see that for the 2-year degree or 60 credit rate, we're the lowest in the market. And for the 4-year rate, we're the second lowest, with really just Westbrook below us, and 6 of the remaining 8 districts are above us. So we've been talking about this for a while. We really came focused on the 2-year rate because it is so low, and also because of minimum wage going up on January 1st. We had concerns about it, and then it caused us to look at everything and decide to come forward and take a bigger look at all of this. As you know, we have a labor shortage, and the subs are heavily impacted by that labor shortage. With our unemployment rates being so low, under 3%, it's very challenging. We also talked a little bit about our own data. So this is just one of the snapshots that I shared. It's not perfectly clear, but the dark green line is Portland schools, and the line, the dark blue line, and the green line, which is above, it's fairly light, is the national. And these are the average days absent per employee. So this is just a perspective that, in general, we are below the national average for absences. Again, we have this data for a few years back. I just thought it was interesting to share this out with you. So this is a snapshot of 2 of the slides, or actually 3 of the handouts that are in there. So you have 3 monthly summary reports, September, October, and November. This is a snapshot of the top of the October report. So that top section where you can see there's a little black box that I circled is the first week in October. So these are reports that the system generates for us. I actually look at these on sometimes a daily basis to get a sense of our fill rate. And so you can see the bottom stat on each of the days is the fill rate. You can see 82%, 79%, 90, 73. So over the course of the week, we have different percentages of fill depending on how many substitutes are needed and how many were filled and how many were unfilled. And so when I see 73%, I get concerned. I mean, really, when I see things below 90, I get concerned. And over the course of the month, you know, this varies depending on what's going on a particular day. So that bottom box that you see there is on the bottom of each of the handouts, so that's basically a summary of the month. The far right column is somewhat cut off, but that is the average fill rate for that week. You can see, I think it's 81%, 75%. So what I look at is really the fill needed, filled, and unfilled. I know people were focusing on all the number of absences, and the reason I wanted to point this out is because the total absences includes more than teachers. So ed techs use this, our administrators use this, and our non-rep group also use this to capture absences, not for subs, obviously, because they don't need subs, but those are captured in that total number. So it's a little bit deceptive if you're looking at that and thinking, wow, well, we've got 87 teachers out. Well, it could be me on vacation, right? So it represents more than just teachers. So this is the proposal. We talked about this last week. Again, we were really interested in having the discussion around the 60 college credit $70 rate. Our recommendation is to bring that up to 85. And then we had also talked about the bachelor's degree rate going from 85 to 90. With your recommendation, we took that up to 95. Again, giving us a little more of a market leader position with our competition. And so that is what we are proposing and what you will be voting on tonight. And you can see the dollar impact on the bottom of that. I'm happy to answer questions that people have.
Does anybody have any questions? No questions. Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Ivanza.
Joseph,
you want to
can
use one of the microphones
over here? But
Is that over the FY17? Is that finance year 2017?
So what we did to do a proposal for the money is we looked at 2 historical years. So we're looking at 16-17 and 17-18. So we took how many subs we had as a proxy for going forward. And those numbers for the proposal is what it would cost, what we think it's going to cost based on past history. So we think if we have the same number of subs this year as we've had in the last couple of years, it would be about a $40,000 change.
Do we have any other questions?
Can I just add one more thing? Somebody had asked the question when we were here last week about roughly how many people we had at each rate. And so I just did a quick poll of who we paid in the last pay period just to kind of get a sense. And we had 22 people at the $70 rate. We had 102 people at the $85 rate. And we had 102 people at the 85 and 68 at $100. So just to get the breakdown of most of our subs are at the $85 rate currently.
Excellent. All right, guys, so we're going to move on the motion. Is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? So I guess I'll just say that after hearing the conversation after the workshop, and the explanation of the recommendation tonight, that it was clear that the board wanted to act on the concern of us attracting more substitute teachers and having a more plentiful pool to draw from when we do need them. And it was also clear that the board looked at it from a very value-driven point where they wanted to make sure that that time was used in its most meaningful way as far as educational time with the students. I also really appreciated the input that the students gave on our workshop. It's so important for board members to hear what actually happens on these classrooms and what the role that the substitute teachers play from their perspective. And again, like you've heard me say many times, these voices from our students are the ones that drive our work, and they're incredibly valuable. So again, I thank them for participating on that workshop. So I guess we'll move on to act. All those in favor of increasing the substitute teacher pay compensation rates, please indicate. Excellent. Oh, I should vote too, right? It is unanimous with the students voting with the majority.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. New business.
And we still have
we still have one.
business, yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent. Consideration, we're still on old business, sorry. Consideration and action to authorize the amendments to MSMA Group Insurance Declaration of Trust. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Superintendent, you need to speak to the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. On the agenda tonight is a proposal to approve changes to our liability insurance carrier's requirements. These changes were approved by the carrier in 2015, but like many member districts, we've not completed our end of the process, which requires our approval and my signature. By way of background, MSMA updated the group insurance trust document as well as the trust documents for their other insurance programs in 2014. In most cases, the trust documents had not been updated since the documents were first drafted in the 1980s. So the updates brought MSMA trust documents up to date to reflect law changes that had occurred since the documents were originally created, as well as any other clarifying or otherwise useful amendments. The amendments you're being asked to ratify for the group insurance trust were largely amendments that helped clarify, resolve ambiguities in the original trust document. So for a brief discussion of each amendment, this is what I would ask you to understand. Section 102 is one of the changes, and that changes the definition of participant. This amendment clarifies that only public schools, the state of Maine, and its political subdivisions are eligible to participate in the MSMA Group Insurance Trust. It's important to limit trust participants to such governmental entities to protect the trust's tax-exempt status. Section 1.11, definition of fiscal year. This amendment is to clarify that MSMA may choose a program year that is other than a calendar year. I believe the MSMA's program year runs from July 1st to June 30th to track schools' fiscal year, so it's the fiscal year instead of a calendar year. Section 4.1K and 4.1T were amended to clarify that the trustees of the group insurance trust can delegate the power to administer the trust to MSMA. Because MSMA is administering the group insurance trust on behalf of the trustees of the trust document is being amended to expressly authorize this delegation of administrative powers from the trustees to the MSMA. I just read this stuff. Section 11.01, this amendment adds the requirement that in order to participate in the group insurance trust, the participating unit must meet the definition of participant in Section 102. In other words, it must be a Maine public school in the state of Maine or one of its political subdivisions. This amendment was proposed so that Section 11.01 is consistent with the definition to participate in Section 102, which we discussed earlier. In summary, items 1 and 4 clarify that participants in the group insurance trust must be public entities. Item 2 clarifies that the group insurance trust can operate on a fiscal year other than the calendar year. And item 3 clarifies that the trustees of the trust have delegated authority to the MSMA to administer the trust. Attached to this item in your packet are the supporting documents, including the member resolution that you're being asked to approve tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? None. Any board discussion? None. All those in favor of authorizing the amendments to MSMA Group Insurance Declaration of Trust, please indicate. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess it's 8 board members with the students voting in the majority, and all those opposed? Abstaining.
I'm going to abstain because I'm a member of the Board of Trustees.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for explaining that. Now moving on to new business. Consideration and action to approve bequest from the estate of Alfred Padula. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, seconded by Ms. Davis. Will the superintendent speak to the motion, please?
Gladly. Dr. Alfred L. Padula was a USM professor, philanthropist, and environmental advocate. His trust directs that 2.5%, so approximately 40% of his residuary estate, be given to King Middle School, and the 12.5%, so approximately $200,000, be given to Portland High School for green roof or solar energy projects. The value of these bequests is approximately $40,000 and $200,000 respectively. Due to the impracticality of completing a viable green roof or solar energy project at Portland High School, the trustee has agreed to support a modification to allow for the installation of energy-efficient windows instead, because she believes Dr. Padula himself would have approved of this use of his bequest. The proposed 2020 CIP request includes, as you know, almost $1 million for windows installations at Portland High School. The $200,000 would offset the request and reduce our ongoing debt service accordingly. King's bequest is not restricted, but there is significant interest in solar energy projects at King, and we would envision holding those funds until such time as they can be dedicated to an energy efficiency project consistent with Dr. Padula's interests. Maine trust law requires court approval to modify the terms of a gift in trust such as this one, so the board can seek the approval of the proposed use by filing a petition with Cumberland County Probate Court. The Maine Attorney General and the trustee of Dr. Padula's trust must be given notice, and if neither the Attorney General nor the trustee objects, it is likely that the court will approve the proposed use of the funds. I would most certainly like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Padula and Dr. Padula's estate for this generous donation. And I also want to mention that there is an increased interest across the district in exploring additional energy efficiencies. Under the auspices of the Portland Climate Action Team, students at King and Casco Bay in particular are working to encourage the board to revisit and revise our current energy policy to reflect this interest through what they're calling the Solar Rise Initiative. So they have asked for time with the board in subsequent meetings, and so we will be looking to get that on the calendar, but I thought that this would be an appropriate time to talk about the fact that Dr. Padula's work has had a significant impact in our community already, and our students have taken the baton and are running with it. So,
thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? None. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Ms. Thompson?
I guess I just want to continue to, although he's no longer with us, Dr. Padula, he's given to the Portland Public Schools over the years quite a bit. The geodesic dome at Lincoln Middle School is because of him. The LEED certification at Ocean Avenue School is because of him. There are various projects at Portland High School because of him. And so he's been a partner with us over the years. I was sad to hear of his passing, but I appreciate the estate still thinking and his foresight to think about Portland Public Schools and how much it meant to him. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Any other discussion? So I, too, would like to thank the estate of Dr. Padula for their generosity and for being such strong supporters of Portland Public Schools. I don't think there's much more that we can add. I think that we've highlighted how much they value school, Portland Public Schools, and how these generous gifts really do make a big difference to our students and our families. So having said that,
can I just make one note that I should have mentioned during my remarks, and that is that we are the last of the beneficiaries that have moved to accept this, so there's a sense of urgency. So this is not on 2 reads, and that's why we brought it to you as a consideration in action, because there is urgency on the part of the estate to have us accept that bequest. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you, Superintendent, for clarifying that. All those in favor of approving a bequest from the estate of Alfred Padula, please indicate. It is unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you, guys. Next. New business, consideration and action. Okay, this is a finish. So this was not.
It's a consideration and action. Oh, yeah.
So consideration and action to approve Trevor Watson as alternate number 1 and Bradford Post as alternate number 2 as appointments to the BFOF District Advisory Building Committee. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Are there any? Ms. Thompson will speak to the motion, please.
Thank you. As the board will recall, the Appointments Committee had an executive session on December 2nd to choose, as Ms. Figdor, Board Member Figdor, mentioned earlier, a replacement to the District Advisory Building Committee for her spot, and she moved over to the board spot. At that meeting, we talked about, since the beginning of the Appointments Committee, we've been very busy this year. We started out with a process and started over with that process. And then from there, we've done several appointments along the way. And we came back together numerous times to replace people after they were chosen because they couldn't serve any longer because of whatever reason, personal reasons. So we had also discussed at that meeting on December 2nd the use of alternate members. And after we appointed Mr. Paul Stevens to fill the spot of Ms. Figdor as the community member, Mr. Watson and Mr. Post were our two alternates as well after the appointment of Mr. Paul Stevens. Should he have not been able to accept the position, we wanted to be able to have a couple people in the pipeline, but also for future. We do realize that the governance structure is not really clear. It sounds like you can be a lifetime member if you're a part of the community. So what we're also going to suggest outside of this appointment this evening is that the Appointments Committee talk about the vacancies among members of the public and how it makes sure that's clear, because right now it just talks about as long as they remained a resident of Portland, which could be, like myself, 48 years. But anyway, so that with regards to process for appointments, we also discussed, and again, that has to go back to the Appointments Committee for process through the board. And then also, there was a little discussion about absences, which just came up recently, and how we handle those. So those are outside of these appointments. These appointments, I've spoken to both Mr. Trevor Watson and Mr. Post. They are under the understanding that they are not actual members of the District Advisory Building Committee. They both did apply to be a part of the District Advisory Building Committee, but they are in the wings should somebody this year, before December, resign or have to be replaced. And we would replace them first with Mr. Trevor Watson, and then followed by Mr. Bradford Post should he not be able to, and so on and so forth. To read to you a little bit about their answers, we treated them just like we did everybody else on the recommendations with regards to the questions that were asked on the applications. And the question that they were asked was, explain why you want to be a part of the building committee, and do you have experience with school construction projects? Excuse me. Trevor and his wife chose Portland to be where they raised their family, and as such have a vested interest in the quality of a public education offered by and for the community. Trevor believes functional and safe spaces are a foundational requirement to the creation of a successful atmosphere to promote and foster the education of youth. He believes the rehabilitation and reconstruction of these schools bucks this trend and is a physical commitment we can make to the future of our community, continuing by saying that it is a visual representation of the support and education families and children. And it is something that he can and would, if possible, like to help out with. Trevor currently is a WPNA board member, as well as involved in the MMC expansion, Maine Medical Center expansion, Andrews Square redesign, and Bramhall Square design competition. Although he does not have experience with school construction projects, he does have experience in the design of large commercial offices and Offices Park in the metropolitan New York and tri-state area, and was a part of a team of architects and interior decorators designing and managing the construction of country clubs around New York City, including the PGA home course, as well as some of the oldest country clubs in the country. For the last 15 years, Trevor has been designing, budgeting, scheduling, and managing the construction of coastal Maine homes ranging from 900 to 16,000 square feet with a maximum build time of 9 months. Very impressive. In addition to Mr. Watson, we have Mr. Post. And Mr. Post is a builder and designer who worked on the construct of the Winfield Children's House in Falmouth, Maine, which is a Montessori school. He also remodeled the Iris Network School for the Blind in Portland. He has mainly been a residential builder for 30 years in the Portland area and has a wide variety of experience in building and building products. He has worked with tradesmen and architects many times throughout his career. And again, they, I believe they may be here this evening, but they are on the other, again, under the understanding that they would be included in the agendas and so on and so forth, so they could keep up to speed, but they're not official members until someone should move on to something else. So I just want to make sure that's clear. They're well aware of that. They're excited to be even an alternate, and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Do we have any questions on the motion? Ms. Davis?
At one point, we talked about having an open enrollment period, and so one question I have is, how long do they remain as alternates? I mean, in perpetuity? I mean, I think that I'm perfectly fine with the two people who've been suggested, but my concern is more that is how we allow for people who have perhaps come to Portland more recently or whose circumstances have changed where this now is something they could take on, how we kind of keep refreshing the pool for this.
Very great question. So we did discuss as well as a committee, which needs to go back to the Appointments Committee, of an open enrollment, kind of like health insurance, for January and August. And in the memo that I gave to all of you back last meeting was that there was a discussion around the need for an alternate appointment, but that it would be December to December. In any given board-appointed committee, the alternates would be refreshed with an applicants from the active applicant list. The alternate names presented in any given year are not indefinite alternates for the length of the particular committee, and again, only for the board year as mentioned. The alternates of that year are welcome to stay active, as well as in the active applicant list for future appointment considerations. Again, that is not written in stone in our governance, but that was a recommendation to put something in place. And then also the open enrollment period of January and August, combining the list that we have currently, but then also opening up for fresh, new insight in people that may be interested in serving on a committee with the Portland Public Schools.
Just so I'm clear, so these two folks will serve as alternates for how long?
December to December, which is board when we turn over, because the open enrollment would start in January. And so the board inauguration is in December. And so the open enrollment period starts in January, and then it would turn over again.
Ms. Morioni?
So I really do appreciate Ms. Thompson's clarification on that, but to Ms. Davis's point, we haven't decided as a full board yet on that, on your question. Yeah. So what Ms. Thompson's discussing was what the Appointments Committee just discussed in general, but we as an Appointments Committee will be getting back together to discuss this and putting this in a packet on the agenda shortly, by January, so that the board can look at it, vote on it, and we can move forward that way. But right now, this is just what we've come up with. But right now, we have no firm answer to your question. Is the answer?
Recommendation.
It's a recommendation, but we don't. Right now, it stands as to where we are with all the members of the committee. No one has an end date at this point.
Any other questions? Ms. Vigdor?
I'm wondering if this consideration of these two alternates is premature, given that the board has not created an alternate process, a process for alternates, and defined what it means to be an alternate. And I suggest perhaps that we put these two gentlemen aside and actually create the process and then come back to considering specific people.
Ms. Moran?
I think the Appointments Committee felt that these people wouldn't change even if we had a process in place in terms of the open enrollment and in terms of a time frame for service. The idea of an alternate was just simply that it would be in case anyone currently on the committee would need to step down. So it's kind of like the chicken and egg type of thing right now, but most importantly, I think it's the Appointments Committee's decision that we are putting forward two names to be considered, and that the process would be decided on after. So again, I feel very strongly that the names that are being put forward, whether there's a process being brought to the board quite yet, these would still be the names that we approved on, and would like to see that move forward.
Ms. Thompson?
After we had the first draft of the governance structure from staff, we had input from the board about changing the members to be in that school district area, and we did 6 at-large members of the general public. And part of the changes that we made to the governance structure was members of the public would be expected to serve on the committee for as long as they remained a resident of Portland, which will be revisited, but also vacancies among public members would be filled by school board based on a recommendation from the board's appointment committee. And so we were seeing this as potentially, if Mr. Stevens wasn't able to have served, we had 2 more behind him, but also in this place, if something should come about in this year, that we don't have to continually keep the wheel moving. But once we put a process in place, as Ms. Morioni said, that the board all agrees on, then we can go from there. Thank you.
And so we've sort of kind of blended in our questions and our discussion. I'm just going to keep us, since we do have kind of like a back and forth, I'm going to give us more leadway to continue if there's any other questions or even some discussion to bring in. Anybody else? Ms. Victor.
Did you consider the gender composition of the committee in making these recommendations?
So we use the same process that we have for all of the other choosing of the applicants. We looked at the questions, not where they reside with regards to school, not because of age, gender, or any other identifiable items. We looked at the questions, as we said we would. After Ms. Davis brought to our attention that we had not chosen to have it in certain districts or certain balance of gender or certain architects and so on and so forth. And so we went back to the drawing board and cleaned it up quite a bit. And then we looked at the questions only. So that's how we came up with it. We didn't look at how many males, how many females, because we didn't know the names until we had chosen them. And then after we chose them, that's when we found out who they were, where they lived, and what their sexual orientation would have been.
Ms. Davis.
Actually, I think you're correct, Ms. Vigdor, that gender did come in, because one of the things when we initially looked at this is that when you pick people who have experience in the building trades, you are picking men. That when we looked at the general, because I remember when we did this resolution, actually analyzing and looking at the background of people in the building trades, of the distribution of age and so on in Portland. And you're right, when we go to looking for building trades, we are almost always going to load the committee with men. Because the majority of people who have experience in the building trades, as these 2 folks do, tend to be male. That's a heavily male-dominated industry. So, I think we'd need to go back. We could go back and look. As I say, these 2 folks, I have no... it's not about the 2 people whose names are being brought forward, but I think one of the original ideas with our resolution was that this was a committee that was supposed to be representative of Portland as a whole, not representative of the construction trades or particular schools or whatever. It was saying that our community as a whole is the group that builds our schools. And so I think we do need to be mindful, because, as I say, with that tendency to look, and the interest of people from perhaps architecture or building trades will skew us to a male-dominated group if we're not careful or actually taking strides to look for women who are part of the building trades. But, we could end up with a committee which is not representative of Portland, which was our overriding goal when we wrote the resolution.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I don't want to have a back and forth. But we, in the governance structure, it says at large. It doesn't talk about gender, trade, so on and so forth. We distinctly took all of that information out because that's how we had done it first. We balanced female and male. We balanced where they lived, what their trades were, because we were very heavy on architects and so on and so forth. When we brought it to the board, that was the discussion we had. The feedback was, take it back, remove all the identifiable items, read the questions, the answers, and go by that. And that was a board agreed upon process, that we were to read the questions and go by the answers only. So that's what we did. So we did not know at any time whether these were male or female or otherwise by reading their questions. It could have been a female. It could have been somebody that doesn't identify with either. So we did not do that. We looked distinctly right at the answers to the questions as we were told to do from the board. Thank you.
Ms. Morioni.
I agree with Ms. Thompson. It's not intended for debate, but it's mostly just to clarify the fact that when we first sat down and looked at it, we were going at it from the initial discussion around make it as representative of Portland community members as possible. So we looked at everything from gender to even if they were immigrant, or look at the equity factor. We looked at all of those things to try and come up with a balanced. We looked at districts, all of those things. So when we brought all that forward, we were then told by board members, no, that wasn't quite right, that we needed to take it back, and we needed to take all of that out. We needed to look with only the qualification piece. And so that's where, and the qualification and the questions. So all three of us are sitting here saying, yes, that's exactly what happened. And we brought it back, and we met specifically around that, because it was a very difficult, I remember distinctly difficult discussion when we had worked extremely hard to make sure it was as balanced as possible. So we are now in, I don't know, what is it, fourth or fifth edition of this, but based on, again, board recommendation and discussion, and went back to the appointments committee with this specific request.
Ms. Bondo, and then Mr. Bobbins.
To have a clarification, because we mentioned this on the new business, but when we mention on the new business, you have some new member who really are part of the appointing committee and just don't have any idea what's going on to the process. Can we just make sure that we are coming to the same page and having another clear discussion about the new member who are member of that committee to know exactly as the process need to be moved forward, because it's feel like we are moving something supposed to be our whole business. But when we introduce as a new business, we need to make sure that all voices to the community members need to be heard. And I think is one missing here, and I think we just need to hold a little bit to meet one more time, maybe in January, to see if that process needs to be continued the same way it is.
Mr. Bobbins.
Just to put a little context in how we came up with these alternates and the alternate process. The appointments committee had to meet several times to find alternates, to fill different committees, building committees, and then replacements. And that's not only a lot of time for the committee to get together, but it could potentially hold back the people actually doing the work. And so that's how we came up with this process and these alternates to do that, is to help us keep moving along with all these different projects that we have going on. So if we pause, there could be a potential, it might not, but could be a potential that, that things are going to get slowed down. So I encourage all my fellow members to approve and vote and support this motion.
Ms. Bondo?
This is just the alternates. Those are just the alternate position that we try to fill up. I mean, we can just hold and having the whole committee member together just to have a clear explanation and to have everybody on the same page so we can move that one forward.
If I could ask one question, does the appointment, and I'm not sure if I should add Ms. Thompson or Ms. Moriani, but does the appointments committee have an idea of when you could recommend a concrete amendment to the governance for the committees that does include the alternates with a definition? I'm trying to figure out what timeline are we looking at before we can get that done.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't even talked with our appointments members yet about a time, and I'm not available any time between now and the end of the month myself. So I would suggest January, and then I'll talk to my fellow board members who are on the appointments committee to pick a date. And then once that happens, we would also need to do a first and second read, because if you're asking then that we would go back and make sure we also have the process to bring forward along with an alternate names. But I'm also confused as to, are you suggesting that we now table this and not have this vote on these alternate members, that you bring the whole thing back to the appointments committee?
I wasn't making a suggestion as much as trying to figure out how things would line up to the governance piece itself.
Yeah.
And then how that it can in turn maybe answer the question of how long the alternate will serve for, or more specific definition of the alternate. But I was not intending to make any suggestion of how we should go about tonight. I think we have a vote to take in a few minutes.
Yeah, I think as soon as we can get together with fellow board members, pick a date in January, and then bring it forward to you to put it on the agenda. I don't have an exact time frame, but as soon as possible.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Davis?
Well, I'm fine with going ahead. I think that one of the things we may want to look at is when we get to an open enrollment, and so I'm hoping the committee will look at the questions and how do we structure that in such a way that it doesn't, sort of the description of the work to be done, the inviting of people, because if on building committees we do continue to load them up with people from the construction trades, we will have male-dominated committees. And I'm not sure where the balance on this particular committee lies at the moment, but that's representative of the building trades. It is not representative of Portland as a whole. And I think that we do need to maintain some sensitivity to that, having served on that committee. And that we recognize that people can serve on these committees without having a building background. That is not necessary, that while people tend to think of a building committee as being made up of people with a building background, there really is a very useful place for people with no building background or who simply have an interest. And in fact, sometimes the members with building backgrounds get us involved in very lengthy discussions from their particular perspective, which is sometimes almost more detailed than really what the work of the committee calls for. So it may be in our questions and in the way we search out information from candidates and think about it from a blind process at the beginning. So I'd encourage the committee, the new committee, it sounds like, that'll take this up, to look at that whole process from how do we seek applicants, knowing how we're then going to look at them, to make sure that we do continue to have whatever committees we're filling be as representative as possible of the stakeholders in a building process, which is greater than building professionals. It includes, grandmothers, taxpayers, young people who've just moved here, sort of a wide range of folks. Thank you.
Ms. Pigdo?
Yeah, I strongly agree with the point that Ms. Davis made, and know that in this case that we have people that are interested in serving on the building committee who are educators and who happen to be women. So I think we risk having multiple people with similar expertise while not bringing in different perspectives, as well as then benefiting from having gender diversity on the committee. I also think that to the extent that Ms. Davis has articulated, and as I remember the conversation at the time, that the overarching goal is to have a committee that is representative of Portland, that we then have to look at things like geography and gender. The initial questionnaire didn't ask about race and ethnicity, so we would need to ask about that. And we can't just look at one question and answer to one question. We have to look at the full person. And there's ways to do it to minimize bias, for sure. And I'm sure Ms. Stoddard has some good practices that she could bring to the appointments committee in terms of how do we minimize bias. But just looking at the answer to one question is not going to get us a diverse committee. It's going to depending on what criteria you set to evaluate that question, it will get you a set of people that met some criteria in response to their question. But I do think that it would behoove us to take this whole process back and reevaluate it with the goal of having a committee that is representative of the city of Portland, has expertise in specific different areas, and we probably want to define those, and that has all of our diversity, and of course has the community voice as well, where we want to have We want to bring both the community's voice to the table, as well as have expertise that we might not have and the staff might not have that can help ensure these are stronger projects.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson and then Ms. Trevor.
I think it's all great feedback, but I'd like to call the question, please.
Sure.
Which means we vote.
Yeah, do we vote or we?
Yes.
But do we vote on
calling
your
the question.
ask to call a question, or we just go right?
Well, I will indulge, but
vote on calling the question.
Okay, so all those in favor on calling the question, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it fails with four votes. I just had one clarifying question, and then I think I'd feel more comfortable putting it to a vote. But Ms. Trevor, you had your hand raised.
I had a clarifying question as well. I was just wondering if someone could refresh my memory just about the process of how we got to this vote. It looks like the Appointments Committee met for the purpose of choosing a replacement for Ms. Bigdor, and at that same meeting came up with a recommendation to the board to put alternates in place. And then did we have any action on that last meeting?
we had discussion around it, and there was discussion around the board talking further about process and talking further, I forget what, sorry, my brain is not functioning at the moment, but I was led to believe from that conversation from the board that when we went back, we were to figure out a possible process for choosing to bring back forward as a recommendation, as well as the replacement and possible alternates. And when we met together, that's when we came up with the alternate process, because if we had called Mr. Stevens and he wasn't able to, then we said we'll be back at square one again. And so we want to bring forward too the alternates. So that's how we ended up here this evening. That's all I can remember at the moment.
It's helpful because, I mean, that to me does affect my decision in this, because I feel like if the board gave direction to the appointments committee, even if it was, a simple kind of nod and not an official action of any kind, then the appointments committee has done what the board asked. I appreciate the concerns around process and equity and diversity, and I agree with all of that. But for the sake of having two people before us today who are reasonably well qualified, I'm hesitant to hold up the appointment of those individuals if, this was sort of a duly authorized process for the appointments committee.
Excellent. So, like I said, I did have one last clarifying question that I don't think was completely clear during the discussion. But if we do approve these two alternates, and it does happen that a replacement, an actual replacement, needs to be made to that committee, do we then have to vote once again to officially name them part of that committee, or would they just slide right in?
We could reconfirm them if you'd like, once the process is in place, but I was just looking at calling the question, and there is not debate around it, so, or voting, but I'm not going to go there. But anyway, we can reaffirm it again once there's another process in place with regards to choosing alternates, because we had been under the understanding and the operating procedures from the board and the direction that we were given that night. We went ahead and called the next two people on the list. I spoke to the people. So I kind of feel like we're going back to day one when we're trying to, it's just, to me, it's very embarrassing to be here we are yet again. So the board needs to, I think, future-wise, is decide on a process, agree on a process, and put it in the governance structure, and put in everything else we can think of, and make sure it's spelled to a T. But this process has left the barn, and people are here this evening. I believe they're here this evening. I have asked them to be here. But maybe they're watching from home and shaking their heads. I don't know. But
yeah, and I understand, I guess this is a bit of a sense that we should get on with our vote. I do want to say one last comment that just based on that last answer, I do feel like there are a lot of, there's a lack of clarity on what process we will take in the future. Again, should we need to actually replace a current member of that committee? I'm not entirely sure if tonight's vote, it makes these two people official members of that committee, or if we are going to have to take it up. And Ms. Thompson, your answer of if I would like to, honestly, is not sufficient for me, because I don't think it's what I like. I think it's what the board would approve and kind of have a consensus around. So we'll move on to take this vote now, and we'll then carry ourselves accordingly. So consideration and action to approve.
Mr. Atkinson has a...
Mr. Atkinson, carry on.
Sorry, Chair, did we do public comment on this motion?
I don't think so. Thank you for calling me out. Do we have any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. So all those in favor of approving Trevor Watson as alternate number 1 and Bradford Post as alternate number 2 as appointments to the BFOF District Advisory Building Committee, please indicate. And all those opposed? So it's 5. So the motion fails. That's 5 votes in favor, 4 opposed. Next, we have new business. The first read to authorize the superintendent to proceed on the development of the design specifications for the rebuilding of Lyseth Elementary School under the Buildings for Our Futures bond. There are no comments on first reads. Next, on personnel items. Consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, 1 year only and probationary teachers. Is there a motion? Mr. Trevorrow, seconded by Mr. Balfans. Would the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, there are four teachers on the personnel agenda for today. I believe they are all, I'll let you talk to them since you're up.
Stepping in for the superintendent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so these are all budget-approved positions. I just wanted to, as a point of clarification, address the second individual who's on this list. Ms. Levesque, her effective date is August 28th. That's not a mistake. She's actually been working since the beginning of the year. She was hired as an ed tech in the district last year. At Rowe, they were very interested in having her step in as a teacher, and obviously from a people perspective, we want that. We want people who know kids and know buildings. She had some requirements to complete before she could get her certification, and so we looked at that and said, yes, we believe she can finish that this fall. And so she's been a long-term sub. I mean, she's being paid as a long-term sub until she completed that work. She has now submitted, and so we're moving her to a contract now. We do have one other individual in this situation who I plan to bring forward at the next meeting, but that's just a little background on that.
Discussion.
Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there are no public comments on personnel items. Any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the personnel items listed at 1 year only and probationary teachers, please indicate. Unanimous with the students voting with the majority. We got to the end. Given it's before the hour of 10, yes it is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none. Is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Mr. Balfans, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. So, all those in favor? Ms. Davis, adjourning? It's unanimous with the students voting in the majority.